Oh, Bretto.
What's up, MP?
Damo just called.
Yeah?
He thinks there's going to be 100,000 people at the Wellness Summit.
Oh, again?
He thinks we're bigger than Michael Jackson, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles all put together.
Damien Christoph has gone completely mad.
Did you know he's made 8 tons of forage?
What?
And now he wants you and I to help him get rid of it.
Oh, Damo.
So look, being the good friends that we are, we've asked him.
You mean forced?
Well, we've kind of twisted his arm to make him literally give his forage away to 100 lucky Wellness Summit attendees.
So if you're ready to enrol for our signature 2 days of inspiration, education and empowerment...
And entertainment.
What do you mean, MP?
Well, Australian Idol winner Wes Carr makes his Wellness Summit debut this year, Bretto.
Wes Carr, you'll be guilty.
So if you're ready to be entertained, head on over to thewellnesssummit.com.
And get 4 value bags of forage muesli or 1 bag each of paleo, muesli, bircher and porridge when you register.
Now, all you need to do is register for this 2-for-1 special, bring a buddy, bring a friend, bring a family member or a colleague.
And then choose your forage selection, 4 muesli or 4 assorted, and get 4 bags per attendee. That's 8 bags per double pass.
That's almost $250 of forage for free when you register for the Wellness Summit on August 25-26 at the Collingwood Town Hall in Melbourne.
That's 150 serves of breakfast, almost 6 months of breakfast just for registering for the Wellness Summit.
Well, it's first in, best dressed. These 100 tickets are only available until June 18 or until sold out.
All the details of this special offer, all the topics, featured speakers and more are over at thewellnesssummit.com.
Thanks for making 8 tons of forage, Damo.
TheWellnessCouch.com, streaming wellness into your lives.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, featuring your hosts Bridget Wood and Julie Tenner.
Before we get started today, I'd love to introduce you to our new podcast sponsor, which is Fire Tonic. If you haven't heard of Fire Tonic before, it is a raw fermented apple cider vinegar that has a whole heap of other goodness in it, such as chilies, turmeric, garlic, horseradish, ginger, just to name a few, and it has this delicious warming, spicy kind of aftertaste that just warms your stomach and your solar plexus and has you feeling amazing just by taking it. But aside from that, raw apple cider vinegar is immune boosting. It's antibacterial, antiviral. It will decongest whatever you are stuffed up in the head with. It's antioxidant and anti-inflammatory. It's also the best digestive booster. Apple cider vinegar is the same pH as our natural secretions and also stimulates those natural secretions. So if you're feeling a bit low in your digestive system, if you've got a bit of a sore throat or feel something coming on, it's great. I've used this before just to knock something on its head, like a sore throat or a virus that's gone through the rest of my family. And for me, I've just kept up with the Fire Tonic little shots, which I absolutely love anyway because I love a bit of spice. And it really does just knock it on its head. So it is locally made here in Torquay, Victoria, in small batches from a really ancient gypsy recipe. And we are absolutely mad for it. So if you also need a bit of a boost this winter that you can take that is delicious, digestive and immune boosting, then please jump on to hillbilby, hillbilby.com.au and check them out. You can also use a special promo code for our tribe, which is Nourish, Nourish 10, in order to get 10% off your order, just to give it a go. Bridget and I use it. It's on our counter all the time. So head on over to hillbilby.com.au/discount/Nourish10 to get your 10% off and start loving on some Fire Tonic.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Emotional Gridlock. What emotional patterns are you in within your relationship? Before we jump into that, we'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au and sign up to join our tribe, where once a week we'll send you a wrap-up email of everything we've put out in the world, and you can pick and choose. We'd love to dive deeper. So nourishingthemother.com.au and drop in your email address on the homepage. emotional gridlock. So Bridget feels a bit left out because I was like, I think I've got a really good idea based on this conversation I've been having recently. And she's like, I feel like I'm on the back foot. So I said, we're just going to dive in, Bridge. You work best on the fly.
We'll give it a go.
So how this has all come about is, well, you reach middle age and you realise it's the time in your life where a lot of relationships start disintegrating. And I know I've spoken about this many times probably over the last couple of years because I hit middle age and this has started happening. And the older I get and the more deeply I know other women in relationship, the more I see what's behind closed doors and the more I realise how profoundly we're called into our authenticity at this point in our lives. That I think there's no accident in that, kind of like our PMS in our monthly cycles. It's the time in our life when we are biologically hardwired and spiritually, I would say hardwired, to question our life, to be very aware of our mortality and ask, what am I happy to live with now? Because it doesn't seem like I've got that long left. And what am I doing with my life? And what is the purpose in my life? And we start listening to the whispers that previously we've towed the line on.
The calling of the soul gets louder as we get older.
Right.
And because also human behavior is so patterned, we become like it's almost like we begin to wake up to our own patterning to the point at which we can run into it so often that we go, what the fuck? And there can be, a lot of pain in becoming aware of what that looks like. And I think that that's also what you're suggesting here too, is that we're called in more and more to face what we're no longer willing to accept, both in our relationships and also within ourselves. It's calling us into radical self-responsibility as well as boundaries and, self-worth.
Totally. And there's nothing like our relationship to make us grow. So that's kind of where I wanted to take the conversation today. So I'll start with a story and then we'll kind of roll from there, Bridge.
Cool.
Do you trust me?
I trust you.
So this morning I was having coffee with my sister, or tea. We were having tea together. And she has children to a relationship that she left several years ago who it's an international was an international relationship. So dad's in Canada, she's in Australia with the kids. It's a really, really, really big, intense backstory. Anyway, as happens with most disintegrated relationships, they go through peaks and troughs of good times where it's okay and times when it's really horrendous. So she's currently going through a horrendous phase and we were talking about that. And I said to her, do you sometimes look back on the woman you were when you were in relationship with this person and wonder who she was? And it took her several goes because she had to kind of really think about my question. And in the end, she said to me, I've thought about this and I realized some time ago that when I think about what happened there, he didn't change, but everything he was doing when it was just me and there were no kids, I could validate and I could make sense of and I could say that was okay because it was okay for him to treat me like that because I could take it. And it was okay because I deserved it. And it was okay because that was what I was worth. And then I had these children and her eldest is a daughter. So a very close mirror. And he started doing the same behavior to them. And it was when I realized you cannot treat someone like that, that I went, you won't treat someone like that. You can't treat them like that. You can't treat me like that. And we had a conversation from there and I just thought, this is profound because she was saying then, I've spoken to several single mothers since then and she said, I've realised it's often a similar story in that it was fine because they could take it when it was just them. That was how their relationship was and they had 1,000 reasons why it was okay. But as soon as it involved their children, they could no longer accept or tolerate what was happening. And I said to her, I find this fascinating and profound because statistically what we talk about in culture fairly easily is that there's a huge incidence of relationship breakdown, the greatest amount of time that a relationship is on the verge of crisis or breakdown or divorce is post-children. And so we say it's because children are so hard. And everyone accepts that. But I said to her, what you're proposing here is almost a hypothesis of it's not because of the children being so hard. It's because they are the living embodiment of you, walking outside of you, and you view the world and their worth and your worth and relationships in a completely different way. And you say, that's no longer okay. And I find that fascinating. And she said, yeah, I really agree with you.
Wow.
And I just thought this is an incredible conversation to have because this adds for me another dimension to family dynamics and the parent-child relationship and just how profound that conscious calling forwards in growth is because what you can't grow up yourself with, your children will force you into growth for,
Yeah.
And just how we don't think we're worth something, but we believe our children are. But they are us. Like, I just think this is such a multifaceted.
It's huge because it's big, like it's painful. It's calls us into not accepting the bullshit anymore, and not accepting, explaining things away, as your sister so clearly demonstrated.
Eloquently did, yeah. So then to just add on to our little, contextual state before we kind of move forwards, Bridge, was I've been getting mad guns into Dr. Schnark at the moment. So he was this huge family and sexual psychologist that I've kind of, gotten really big guns into. I love his work. And he talks about the mirror, which is really interesting because I hadn't heard it so specifically or eloquently spoken through a modern day psychologist, I suppose, or therapist of any sort in these terms. So this is not word for word his words. This is my summary of his concept. So I just thought I'd hit you with a few here and then we can kind of digest from there. What do you think?
Sure.
So he says here, the battles of selfhood is much greater than hormonal drive. So when he's talking about hero, I was thinking, and I was extrapolating out in so many different ways. So I think it's easy for us to go, like in our monthly cycles and our PMS and our bad moods, you're just hormonal, as opposed to there being actually something you're trying to call yourself up to stand up for, to change, to become more aware of, which is the whole purpose of getting in tune with our cycles, is to realise our PMS is not dysfunctional, that it is in fact us calling us into more and more self-authority, self-authenticity, just really, it's not that you're biologically flooded with hormones and that's why that's your problem.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I was thinking about it in terms of sex drive, that we all go, oh, well, it's because, males are hardwired to have the best sex drive at 17 and 18 and women aren't till, a good decade later. So, and then they decline. So it's the hormones.
But but that really relies on such old school thinking that there is no separation between. That there is a separation between mind and body. That they exist independent of each other. Whereas, as we know, like your mind is consistently all the time influencing your hormones. So that's so reductionist, really, to even say that this is, what happens essentially.
Yeah. And then I was extrapolating out and thinking about teenagers and how we go, oh, they're just so hormonal. Are they? Or are they really trying to grow and discover and say what's not authentic to them? And that ruffles some feathers about subordination and towing the line versus speaking in an authentic voice.
Yeah.
So we're talking here about hormonal theory versus the drive for consciousness and self-autonomy.
And individuation, which is, can be a painful process in a family which wants you to fit in, or in a society that wants you to fit in.
So I'm going to say this again. The battles of selfhood is much greater than the hormonal drive theory. So the feeling of you getting to a point where you go, this isn't me, is more powerful than saying it's hormones. Because it's not just the hormones. It's easier to say, oh, I'm not interested. My hormones must be really low at the moment. I'm just hormonal. I've got my period. It's easier to say it's hormones than it is to say, oh, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. I don't like how I'm being treated. I don't like the sex that we're having. it is far easier to say, I'm hormonal, than it is to stand up and say, this is what is not okay and not right in my world. So when you look beyond the sexual problems or the relationship problems that many of us have, ultimately what we find is that people are withdrawing from each other. So it's not the problem per se, it's what the problem creates in terms of a dynamic. And what always happens is when we come to a problem, we're facing parts of ourselves we're not willing to grow through, and we're faced with our own level of anxiety, our own level of discomfort, our own parameters for challenge, our own ability to see our flaws and be met by them. And so instead of diving into that and having the hard conversations, dealing with your own anxiety, we withdraw, because it's easier to vacate and leave than it is to stand in that almost conflict. So as difficulties or sexual difficulties in a relationship deteriorate, we tend to take it personally. We say it's because, I must not be pretty enough, I'm too old, you don't love me. And it's all because we're looking for what Dr. Schnarch refers to as a reflected sense of self. And I find this really interesting when we're talking about self-worth. So when we are in a relationship, and we've talked about this actually with State of Affairs, what's her name?
Esther Perel.
Yes, Esther Perel. So she talks about it, which you and I have spoken about before, is that when desire wanes but a relationship still wants to be functional, stay together, that part of that reason is because we're merging too much. There's too much togetherness as opposed to enough separateness. So she talks about the importance of separate identity, and that maintaining sense of self is actually what we find most desirous about a person. Our partner we find most desirable when they are in their own power, as opposed to merging into you. So it's this concept of you need enough self in a relationship to maintain the mystery and the ability to hold tension and the ability to hold and regulate your own anxieties and your own sense of, rather than needing someone to do that for you, right?
Yeah.
So Dr. Schnarch talks about it in terms of the mirror. So he's saying that we're often with people where in a partnership you can be looking for a reflected sense of self rather than an owned sense of self. And when we're doing this, we're looking for our partner to become the mirror of who we think we are. We will like them and stay in relationship while they reflect what we like.
Yeah.
Which is like the, early stages of relationship where we go, I like that mirror.
Yeah.
I like how you react to me this way and you say that I'm beautiful and I like that. And so I'm going to keep coming after that because I like how you're defining me rather than me defining me. And so we find that we will stay with this person while they're giving us the picture we like. But as we are designed biologically and spiritually to be called forwards into growth, the closer you get in a relationship, the stronger that mirror becomes, and we start to see parts reflected back to us we don't like so much. Because now that mirror is getting a little bit too close to the parts that we don't want to own. And that partner who used to validate us and say, you're beautiful, you're young, you're interesting, you're mysterious, you're dynamic. And we used to seek for that. We used to look for that, because then if they said we were beautiful, we were beautiful. And if they said we were sexy, we were sexy. And if they said you're interesting, we knew we were interesting. And if they sought communications or conversations with us, we knew we were important, as opposed to knowing those things on our own.
Well, yeah, then us being those things just because we are, as opposed to needing someone else to say that.
Right? So when we hit the challenges where we don't like the things that our partners are bringing to us in reflection, we withdraw, because we're meeting our edges of who we are, right? And our edges of growth. And when we don't like it, as we talked about before, and it brings up our anxieties and it brings up our ability to self-regulate or not, and that person who was feeding those things for us no longer is, and we are forced to find it on our our own, often we won't enter the arena. We'll withdraw because that's easier.
Yeah, way easier.
Right? And so when we withdraw, we don't feel desirable, and our dependence on our partner for making us feel good about ourselves is gone.
And it also, as we know, we're always seeking and need a balance of like praise and reprimand. And the more that we're trying to seek one of those things from our partner, the more we're going to be seeing the opposite. The more we're going to see those sides of them that we struggle with, because we actually need, on some level, even in a respectful relationship, a level of equilibrating so that it is an honest relationship, an authentic relationship.
So with the reflected sense of self, we enter sexuality or relationships with people wanting to like us, wanting to show us the parts that we like about ourselves as well, and say, this is who you are and we like you. And so often we make decisions to please that person in order to get that validation back. So this is when we start being the good girl and the nice girl and towing the line rather than rocking the boat and doing things for the other people because it's what you think they want or what you think will please them, because then you'll get the feedback that feels good, right? Yeah. As opposed to it coming from an authentic place. Until at some point, because of the way that we are designed for growth, we say to ourselves in one or many ways, I don't recognize myself, or I'm selling out, I'm disappearing, or you're taking me for granted. And when this happens, most people then have a feeling that something like, I must be falling out of love, or I've picked the wrong partner, or our libidos don't match. I've picked the wrong sexual partner. This person I'm not compatible with. And we're in an emotional gridlock. So Dr. Schnark termed this term, and I just really find it so interesting. I don't know, I just think stop working on your relationship because your relationship is working on you.
I love that. Stop working on your relationship because your relationship is working on you.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Which is what you and I talk about, but I just thought I find this so fascinating that we're calling ourselves into integrity all of the time. And when we look at relationships through this filter, there's nothing wrong. Because it's all right. When you look at it through the filter of the mirror and growth, it's all right.
Yeah.
Because it's working on you to grow. And that is the whole purpose of relationship.
I love that we're doing this topic in the context of my time away. So I've just got back from a week in Broome with my parents, my husband, our 2 kids, and my brother and his wife. So 8 of us in a house for a week, really, close quarters. And because I love to look at, how we relate and, all of this stuff, I've really been having to face the patterning that I can see me playing out in terms of how I've seen my parents' relationship be.
Tell me about that.
Well, my dad, as I've talked about before, he struggles with, intimacy, emotional intimacy, and his love language is very much acts of service. So he will just do anything you ask without you even asking. And to the point where I can find it annoying because I can see it taking away from my children's self-responsibility. But I can see that that's his way of giving. But what that means is that he will do those things to, instead of being vulnerable or heartfelt, like eye-to-eye conversation, which are those
instead of meeting his own anxiety in a situation.
Yeah. Instead of
he'll acquiesce to the other person's needs.
Yes. And he will deviate away from facing that by doing something. Which is part of, I can see his childhood wounding there, and also that masculine need to provide and do and be in service or in production, I suppose. And so I was really sitting with how my own relationship mirrors that and how I can find it so difficult to really get super vulnerable with my husband because I keep feeling like I'm going to meet my dad's inability to meet me. Which is big because I don't think that I've fully noticed it until I start to see him relating to my daughter and how he tries.
Your dad or your husband?
My dad. Because I watch my dad relate to my daughter and see him trying to move her out of her emotional states or kind of just distract or, he really can't handle it. And I thought, wow, is that what I was experiencing? And is that the discomfort that I'm being called in to face again, to see the pattern that I'm tasked with perhaps changing. Because I don't doubt that we're not, the nature of consciousness is this linear, and we think about this linear experience of life, but consciousness is this idea of everything happening in time, in presence. And so how much is me witnessing these things in my awareness of part of me saying, oh, that's for you, like to see where your pattern is and where you can grow through. And it was just really super powerful, and I could feel certain points in the trip, like where I have my own edginess up, or where I have my own judgments on my husband, and where I wanted to make him wrong for something or feel out of attraction to him, and why I was feeling like that. And it was just so interesting to recognize that in relationships, we can so easily go to all of those things that you've listed about why things aren't working. But those perceptions of us feeling that way are actually the red flags for us to deepen within ourselves and ask, what are we not bringing? What are we not bringing that we're asking ourselves to bring? Or where are we not speaking out where we're asking ourselves to speak up? Whether that be setting boundaries or demonstrating our own worth. And then I started also to look at the judgments that I had on my husband, like not showing up in these certain ways. And then was asking myself, okay, well, where is he? And then I'd do a little experiment for a few hours and see that he was showing up in all of the exact ways I didn't think he was. And it was, again, that demonstration that our relationships actually offer us both support and challenge to grow, but that we can get so stuck in this cycle that we're not being met the way we want to be met. But actually, when we can see it there, we can learn to look for it and ask ourselves the right questions for where it's helping us and where it's showing us our next level of growth. It's there in plain sight, but we're just not so cultured or taught or conditioned to look for it.
So when you're saying you're looking for it, so you're not even saying it's absent here, but it's present here in another area. You're actually challenging yourself to see where it is present beyond your preconceptions.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, can
you be a bit more specific?
Yeah.
With that?
So even examples where I'll feel like my husband doesn't give me enough time or respect my work, and my work is being legitimate. I then was like, okay, well, where does he do that? And then in the space of 3 hours, I saw 4 examples of where he said, oh no, do you need a bit longer to do that? And then we can go after you're finished. And then he said, look, if you need to go down to Geelong, I'll certainly come home, from work earlier, and you go that because you need to show up for your business too. And it's in here I am, I can run these stories about where I'm not getting support, and then I can go, oh, actually, I just got shown X, Y, and Z of where I'm getting, what I want above and beyond what I'd even asked for. So it was just really interesting. And then also where I felt like I wasn't getting his honesty or authentic voice, I realized, well, I'm not going to get that from him unless I'm willing to have the hard conversation. And so a conversation between us, it's been going back and forth for a few months, it's been having another child. And I realized that I can sense his lack of certainty because of his language around it, but I also know that I'm not in certainty either. And so I said, I want to hear about your willingness versus your unwillingness to have another child. And he didn't hold back. He said, look, I'm really not willing at the moment, and listed off all of these reasons. And I could feel myself wanting to give him reasons why it's a good idea, but then I thought, no, I've asked for this honesty. I want to give that the space to be heard and just sit with that, as opposed to needing to solve it, change it or anything else, because I know that that's actually what I'm constantly seeking for him to do to me. I mean, that's intimacy. That's an ability to hear each other and make that space of not always having the answers okay, and make that space of pain okay between you. So, yeah.
It requires a certain amount of self-growth to be able to handle your own anxiety and to parent yourself in those moments and to remain non-reactive.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, it was funny because I told my mum afterwards that I'd had that conversation, and she said to me something like, oh, you can't be angry if you've asked for him, to be honest. And I was thinking, well, I can still be whatever I want to feel. But that's true. I mean, if I'm asking for that honesty, I also have to be willing to feel and deal with what I get back.
Exactly. You have to be willing to hear the parts that you don't want to hear because it reflects a different sense of identity.
And perhaps a different set of values, if you feel like they want one thing and you want the other, and you're like, how do we meet here? I mean, that is, when you're having a long-term monogamous relationship, that is what happens. You find each partner has to feel safe and supported to grow in the way that they want to grow. And sometimes it's going to require to have a lot of hard conversations to ensure that each person gets to individuate the way that they want to, as well as contributing to growing a family.
When it comes to our sexuality, we want to look at the beliefs and the meanings that we've picked up as much as the ones that we've made up about our experiences.
In our Loathing to Loving program, we look at relationships to our family, partner, children, and feminine self, and spend a module in Nourish and Nurture, deeply expanding that feminine wisdom. Our Sensuality and Sexuality course is the next dive, exclusive to those who've taken part in the Loathing to Loving program.
The reason for that is the theory and the tools that you gain from Loathing to Loving underpin the knowledge of the psychosexual story that we build upon in our Sensual Sexual Deep Dive. For $289, you can join us in our exclusive Sensuality Sexuality course, or 3 payments of $97. We really want to walk you through loving your sexuality more than your sex life.
To find out more and join us, go to nourishingthemother.com.au/online programs. In our tribe, in our private Facebook group, we've had the question come up, around, or comment really, and it was quite vulnerable to say that this listener had to stop the podcast, that episode that we did on the top 10 ways to demonstrate self-worth for your kids. She had found it really hard to listen to because she had recognised in her own relationship ways in which she was not being treated the way that she wanted to be treated, or that she found it all appropriate to be nurtured, to be demonstrating self-worth in her kids. And that kind of thing, I wonder too, is a demonstration too of this gridlock that we can find ourselves in terms of the patterns we get into. What's the pattern in terms of, am I allowing too much here?
I think it still comes back for me to the same topic of this. Even in the relationships that we want to, through our moral compass, judge as wrong, I still want to come back to this controversial statement of there is nothing wrong and there is function in the dysfunction. And stop trying to work on your relationship, because your relationship is working on you. You are the purpose and the point here. You have the perfect relationship with the perfect mirror for your perfect growth and evolution forwards. The question is always, will you stay in a monogamous relationship long enough to get to the other side of that?
And to face that, to see that out.
Because it's sometimes... I don't want to sound judgy, because it's not. This is really just talking about spiritual, relationship concepts, but it's easier to think the grass is greener, or to say, well, I've just got the wrong partner, or you don't validate me, or you don't treat me well enough, or, we're not in this relationship together. And if I'm with this person, it'll be better. And when I have this affair, I realise I really like this mirror that this person I'm having the affair with is giving me. I like that. I like my reflected sense of self through this other person. I don't like what you reflect to me, so I'll withdraw from you. I like what you're reflecting to me. But what we'll find is, and that's why the incidence of second, third and fourth marriages, they increase dramatically on their separation rates the more marriages we have, is for this very reason. Because we will always hit the same gridlock and the same pattern to force us to grow, because it's us. We are centric to the relationship.
Yeah, it's like you keep running into yourself.
Yes. And it can be a fantasy to go, I'm going to have all this beauty with this person. But if you're only chasing the fantasy, you will build the nightmare until the point where that pain is so great, you're either going to withdraw or disconnect and find the next reflection you like better, or you'll learn a lesson, you'll grow through that lesson, and you'll change the course.
And I think that kind of, idea of escaping, it's like the path to hedonism. It is hedonistic because it's trying to look for the pleasure without the pain. And then you get both of those if you're willing to stay and grow, I think.
Well, I think this is the incredible path that a long-term monogamous relationship offers, is to know yourself so incredibly well and to continue to learn and grow with who you are, that you realize how little you know of yourself and therefore how little you know of this person that you wanted to say years ago. You knew everything about them and they were boring. And yet the older you get and the more you grow personally in your relationship, I think the more that mystery grows of who you are and therefore of who this person is that's lying next to you in this bed. And I think it's a total fantasy to say that our sex life declines as we get older and that our relationships get stagnant as we get older. I think that's fucking bullshit because as we approach relationship through the lens of discovering more and more of my own mystery and therefore discovering more and more of who are you? Who is this person who is in front of me? Who is this person whose soul I'm still growing through and learning? And who is this person who can touch me in ways that are beyond a physical muscle reaction? Who can take me to orgasms beyond what I thought was physically possible because they're not just physical. Like to think that a relationship stagnates is ridiculous. And the very premise.
A relationship stagnates because we stagnate.
That's my point.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I didn't even know where to go. But I also want to say, I think we always underestimate how tough growing up is. I think we always underestimate it.
Yeah, I agree.
And even you and I who are wanting to seek a long-term monogamous relationship and grow in our spirituality, our sense of self and identity through the pain of that, even though we are committed to that, we still find ourselves hitting our own edges, hitting gridlock in our relationships. And I'm still shocked sometimes at how hard that is, how much of myself I have to face. And I don't think it's ever easy. I don't think that anyone who finds it easy has got the right answer.
No, and I think that it's just selling an illusion, I think, because I think the reality is that life means that we're called to grow, and growth by nature is often difficult. And so we're going to hit those really big edges.
And continually. It doesn't stop. It's not like you go, well, I'll sort out this issue in my relationship and then we'll be good.
In my relationship, which really means in me.
Which is, it's just, I find it ridiculous. You don't need, there's nothing wrong with your relationship.
No.
It is serving its purpose perfectly. But you will keep evolving and keep finding new layers of yourself. And it's whether you want to hang in there for that mirror or not, I think. So,
do you notice, but in terms of emotional gridlock in your relationship and the patterns that you face, do you notice?
I'm going through one at the moment.
So are you willing to walk us through what that looks like?
It doesn't look very grown up, Richard. If I'm going to be totally honest with you.
Well, I think we all, but I think also, right, like if we think about that constant, new quantum level of growth, we've got to, sometimes we even start those new levels of growth as an infant,
that's how I feel.
What am I doing here?
Yeah, it's totally how I feel. And that's also, I want to say, if you are listening to our podcast and going, oh, so much wisdom, blah, 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 like, don't put us on a pedestal because mate, we are going through exactly what you're going through. Yeah. And those pain edges are really brutal sometimes.
Yeah.
And I had been feeling the whispers of several points in my relationship. I'm like, not satisfied with that. I don't like what's happening here. But towing the line, getting through, and it's okay, coming up with all the reasons why it was fine. Until I think it was probably all culminated, actually, funnily enough, because it's the purpose of family dynamics too, right? Was when my fourth went through her whole tooth, rejection of breastfeeding, and my whole world kind of like blew up in the space of 2 weeks. And it was at that point, like getting your period or having PMS, where you're like, well, it was fine, and now it's not. That's pretty much where I got to. And so, in inverted commas, my poor husband was completely side-blinded because he had no idea. Because we do ourselves a disservice. We think that we are going to have a more validated sense of self and a better relationship by towing the line. And the truth is we're not. Because doing things for other people to like you will always come back to bite you. It comes back sexually and it comes back in a relationship. And so I found myself in my inner autumn surveying the land and looking internally and going, I'm not okay with what's happening here. And am I willing to balls up and have those conversations? Because hard. And I did not choose an appropriate time.
No. How did you know that?
Well, had a very rare date night. So we'd booked in this date night with parents for a while ago, and the couple we were going out with, it fell through. And so we decided we'd just go anyway. And we were catching up with friends next day. So anyway, we're having dinner at this other friend's house. And so we're driving the car on the way there. So it's really rare that we have like time like that. And I'd been thinking about it and chewing about it over in my head and how am I going to start this conversation, and did it all day. And I had withdrawn instead of entered the arena so many times, probably over the course of that week, so many times.
Which is so painful.
Because what I want to say is, it's just too busy. There's too many kids around. We just were passing ships. We couldn't find time. No, Julie, I call bullshit on you.
Yeah.
Because that's not true. If I really wanted to find the time, I would have. But I didn't want to, really. It was easier to withdraw than it was to fight or show up. And so, and I at the same time knew I was doing it though, right? It's not like I'm unconscious to the fact that I'm withdrawing.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of stacking that list up as I withdraw each time and kind of in my head going, what the fuck did you do that? Just fucking do it. Like I feel like I'm in my head going, just do it. Come on.
It's like the two Julies, like, no, I'm just scared. Just do it. No, I'm just scared.
Right?
Just do it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so we're in the car and I'm literally having that battle in my head and I'm like, fuck it. And I just like, you just got to start. You just got to like blurt it out and then it'll just keep going because then you can't stop, right? Then you're on that path.
That's an express train.
And that is what it was. And I said, I was retelling because I then had a intimate catch up with another girlfriend a couple of days afterwards, and I was retelling her. I said, I find myself at this really interesting standpoint, talk about gridlock, right? And here's where I get also a little bit lost in my own head about what I will and won't accept or tolerate in a relationship, because let me break it down and then I'll bring it back, Bridge.
Yeah. Sure.
Because I know that verbal communication is part of my genius, but it is not part of my husband's. And as a general rule, is not part of the masculines in general. To talk out processing, to talk out emotion, to talk out moving through something. I can do that and it feels good, and I can almost kind of do better when I talk it out because I can almost observe myself in the process. That's not what he does. He's the filing cabinet that needs to very slowly close the cabinet on one topic and very slowly open the next cabinet on the other topic before he surveys all of the information folders within it. And then he might decide, does he need to close that cupboard to look at another resource folder before, like, fucking excruciating. So, it was one of the things I learned from the Queen's Code was when you think there's been enough silence and you've waited for an answer, count to 20 and wait another 20 seconds.
Oh my God.
So I'm in my head visualizing. So and I said to my friends, I know that I am intimidating when I am in my verbal diarrhea. That is intimidating. If you are against someone who is highly empowered in an area of life that you are not, and they're going to town on you, and it's not your genius, you feel disempowered, not empowered. And I know I'm like a firecracker. I'm like whip and whip and whip, and it's super sharp, and I don't mince my words, and I don't muck around or beat around the bush. I wouldn't say I'm not nasty, mean, vindictive, or use nasty words.
You're assertive when you're in that
I'm
space.
assertive. I'm incredibly clear. I've thought about it. If I'm having a conversation with you, I've thought about it for a really long time. It is clear, it is concise, and it is right on your sore spots. And none of those things are particularly pleasant in a relationship. I'm a hard person to be in a relationship with. So I know these things about myself. And I know this about my husband. And so I was waiting for that filing cabinet to close and to open in my head. I'm visualizing those drawers and there's still silence. And I'm counting to 20 and I'm counting to 20.
Oh God.
And I'm counting to 20.
Like, could you cut the air with a knife?
So many times in my head.
Oh man.
And in the end I went, it's a lot of silence over there. And he said, I know, I'm processing.
How did that feel to hear?
I went, I was really honest with him. I said, I know that you're processing. I really know that. And I get why you need to do that. But when I'm met with silence, I am plagued with insecurity. Because even though it's hard for you to hear, I've just completely opened up all of my vulnerability and sore spots and soft underbelly to you. And I'm getting silence back. And that hurts. And so he attempted to kind of address a couple of the issues, but in a way that was still very kind of, I still need to work some stuff out in my own head about this. And that is where it has been left. We are still currently in emotional gridlock. And what has shifted, and this is where I'm not sure, is because I thought, you know what, I shouldn't be the person who berates him, because in my head I'm not sure that my need is for verbal validation. It's not his need. And what has happened in the last week is I'm saying, well, this conversation is only worthwhile if you can have a conversation with me about it, because that's what makes me feel good and that's my genius. But his conversation, in inverted commas, happens through action. So I can see of the, let's say, 4 topics I brought to the party, I can see 3 of those that he has radically made huge physical changes to during the week. We have not had a conversation about any of them. But his conversation has been in action. So who am I to judge that? But at the same time, I feel like he's wussing out by not having a conversation with me, because that is the MO of where he's come from.
Yeah.
Let's not communicate. Let's just kind of appease.
Which is the same as my husband.
And then she'll like me again and we'll just move on. And I don't have to feel my anxiety and my awkwardness and the hard stuff in the hard conversation. We can just move on.
And that's a patterning at play, right?
Right?
Yeah.
And I kept thinking about it. And then this is now like a week later, and this morning I said to him, are we going to have a conversation about stuff? And he said, well, if you want to. I said, no. It is not if I want to. I only want to have a conversation if you have something to say. I don't need to say anything. I want to hear something. And I'm still waiting for that filing drawer to open.
Which must be deeply excruciating, because you have such a high value on this.
Right.
And I know that, like, for you, reading Esther Perel's work was a real challenge.
Yeah, it was.
Because she really, talked about perhaps that not being the best method.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
She's really big on intimacy in that, well, I guess it's kind of like the merging. The more that you merge together, the less separateness you have, and what you need for high desire is more separate identities. But I still think, yes, I'm not looking to merge with another person. I'm looking to have my own identity but this is where I want to be careful about what we were just talking about before in terms of the mirror, in terms of, am I looking to be validated by my partner to make me okay? Because I can see that pattern and how I've grown through it is I never felt sexy unless my partner said I'm sexy. And in my head I go, I'm not desirable unless I am desired. Which is total bullshit, because it's not, you being sexy doesn't make you sexual. And you being beautiful doesn't mean you're sexual. Your sexuality is what makes you beautiful. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
You already are that thing, not because it's reflected by someone else.
Yeah, that's not because someone else says it or not.
Yeah. So I can see how I've grown up through many of those patterns in my relationships. And I'm careful, because I have had those words come out of my mouth where you don't see me. You don't validate me. But what's me? Am I seeing me? Am I listening to me? Am I validating me? Am I saying, like, one of the conversations we have was our weeks at the moment are just insane, and I was having issues because we have 4 kids. So my youngest, it was pretty much, we would split up. So my husband works a kind of 7 to 7 kind of time frame between leaving home and being home. And then he's out. Wow, can you hear my voice disappearing on me? No mistakes there. He's out on a Monday night with his sport, Tuesday night with my daughter's sport, Wednesday night with my son's sport, and Friday night we split up, and the last couple of Thursdays he's had work things on. So Monday to Friday, I'm solo Mio parenting, getting everybody everywhere, house everything, still trying to work around, having kids everywhere. And he was not seeing our younger 2 children at all Monday to Friday, like at all.
Wow.
And so our 3rd child was starting to have behavioural issues.
Wow.
And so that was one of the things I called him on. and said, I don't have the thing to fix it, but this is not working. And, you know, you were talking about work before. I'm the same. I'm like, I want you to validate my work, and I want you to say my work is important, because when you get up in the morning, you're focused on getting you out of the door for work, and there is nothing that stops you.
Yeah, yeah.
And you work all day, and then you come home when you're done with work. How nice for you.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying, he got a bit of front and said, I'm not saying work is easy. But that you are not dealing with the mental load. You are not getting up in the morning and thinking, who needs to be where? Who needs to get ready? Have I got lunches? Have I got dinner organised? Have I done the shopping? Have I done all of the work? Have I met emotional needs? Has everyone got everywhere?
Is anybody sick? What do they need?
Yeah. And then around, is my husband, is my partner at work, not work? What do you know? And then around all of that, fitting in my work. You don't fit in. You go to work. And I want the same opportunity to be like, I'm out. 3 o'clock, 3 till 6, I'm out. See ya.
Yeah.
And he called me on it and he said, I give you that, but you don't take it. And I said, you're right. If I'm really honest, you're right. I want to sit here and say, you don't walk in and say, do you need to go? And so I'm going, well, he doesn't care. He doesn't want my work, you know, da-da-da. No. Because anytime I've said, I've got a podcast, I've got to do this, he's like, yeah, what time? We'll fit it in, da-da-da-da. And he shows up for that. But my level of worth around it wasn't big enough to say in the diary, Thursday night, I need you home at 6 because 6 to 9, I'm out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not doing that
For yourself.
for myself.
So your intuition is calling you into into that frustration that you're currently feeling to break through that.
Right? But in my mind, I'd made it all his fault. He doesn't see me. He doesn't validate me. He's not showing up for me. He's not like,
Yeah.
how perfect is the relationship to make you grow where you need to grow? Right?
Absolutely. And it can be so brutal to face that too.
Oh, like
'cause
it's
so uncomfortable. It's hard to own the parts of ourselves that we struggle with.
Yeah. So, you know, I don't even know what the point of going into that was, honestly, Bridget. But just to give you context around emotional gridlock, that at some point we all go through it. And there's no dysfunction in it. That if you are willing to look reflectively at yourself, not the relationship, if you perceive or enter a situation knowing the relationship is perfect, but that you are being called into growth and it hurts, then I think it completely changes the outlook that you have in making a problem a solution. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wonder how many relationships will be changed or saved if we looked at relationships as being perfect, not dysfunctional. In terms of forcing us to grow, because there's nothing like intimate relationships to force us to grow. And that's not to say that all relationships are going to stay together. They're not. But if that relationship served purpose of you finding more of who you are or of growing up in ways you would otherwise not have, then that relationship has still been perfect for you.
It's such big stuff. And I love that, that we've, really brought the willingness to open that up, because it can be painful, really to lean into that and to lay that out there as well, because we're learning just as everybody else is. We just bring this to the fore because we know that these are conversations that other mums want to be having, and they're so needed.
So please rate us on iTunes or share any podcasts that have really resonated with you, and message us and let us know what has spoken to you, so that we can either, do a little bit more on that, or give you a little bit more, answer questions, or just letting us know what those ripples are doing in your world just really keeps us going too. We so deeply appreciate it. And you listening week after week, it's really incredible.
That's lovely. So don't forget to nourish. No. We forgot to talk about where you can find us. Where can we find you, Jules?
At thepleasurenutritionist.com. And hang on, what are your movies? Suburbansandcastles.com.
Yeah, so this week we've got The Gut Movie in Geelong. And then we've also got this week as well, The Goddess Project in Melbourne. So 2 really
busy
great
week.
films. Busy week, yeah.
Yeah. And connect with us is nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother on Instagram and Facebook.
And don't forget to nourish the mother to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
This year, the Wellness Summit returns.
For those of you on your own health journey, you know that a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 step back, and you think you're doing well and then something else pops up. It's like you're always learning. It's not something that just happens overnight and suddenly you're well.
If I actually had been so wrong about this really important thing in my life, what else was I wrong about? And it got me down this place of questioning all the concepts that I had. And then I came to one question, which was, who am I beyond concept?
When I was a little kid, I really always had trouble with food intolerances. I realised that there was a lot to be said for the way you eat.
You come to the same place that I came to, and it's a place of complete freedom.
Joe Witten and Fuad Kassab feature at the 2018 Wellness Summit. Bigger and better than ever. Tickets on sale Friday, May 4 at thewellnesssummit.com.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.